Hello everybody, my name is Megan Martini and this is my presentation on methamphetamine. Here's a preview of everything I will be talking about in this presentation. So to start, what is methamphetamine? Methamphetamine, or meth for short, can be defined as a synthetic stimulant that affects the central nervous system. It increases levels of dopamine, a brain chemical linked to pleasure, motivation, and reward. This causes an intense rush of energy, alertness, and euphoria, but it also makes the drug extremely addictive. It's often sold as a powder or a rock, and it can be smoked, injected, swallowed, or snorted. Here is a list of common street names that it goes by. So meth is made of acetone, lithium, toluene, hydrochloric acid, pseudoephedrine, red phosphorus, sodium hydroxide, sulfuric acid, and anhydrous ammonia. Methamphetamine has been around for over a century, first created in Japan in 1919 after amphetamine was developed in Germany in the late 1800s. Its use exploded during World War II when soldiers on both sides were given meth to stay awake, and Japanese kamikaze pilots were even given high doses before missions. After the war, leftover military supplies led to widespread public misuse in Japan. In the 1950s, meth was legally prescribed in the US as a weight loss aid and antidepressant, which made it easy for students, athletes, and truck drivers to use as a stimulant. Abuse worsened in the 1960s when injectable forms became common. In 1970, the US government made most uses illegal, and motorcycle gangs took over production, especially in rural areas. And by the 1990s, large Mexican drug organizations built high volume labs in California, while small homemade stovetop labs also spread. From there, meth distribution expanded across the US, into Europe, and throughout Asia, where major productions now occur in countries like Thailand, Myanmar, and China. Meth use is most common among young and middle aged adults. The highest rates are in people ages 25 to 54. Use among teens has declined, but young adults 18 to 25 still showed noticeable experimentation. Adults ages 35 to 44 currently have some of the fastest rising overdose rates. Meth use is most common among men, but the gender gap is smaller than with many other drugs. Women who use meth report higher rates of depression, trauma, and relationship related stress, and they tend to start using at a slightly younger age. Meth use affects all racial groups, but the burden differs by region, with white Americans historically having the highest overall prevalence. Meth use is much more common in Western, Midwestern, and rural United States. The highest impact states include Oregon, Nevada, Montana, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri. Rural communities are especially affected because of fewer treatment centers, higher poverty rates, more social isolation, and historical presence of local meth labs. Meth use is strongly tied to poverty, unemployment, limited access to health care, chronic pain, and homelessness. Many people report using meth to stay awake for work, improve mood, or cope with stress. And co-occurring conditions include high rates of depression and anxiety, trauma history, and polysubstance use. As far as historical and current trends, meth use in the United States dropped in the late 1990s to 2000s after strict laws like the 1996 Methamphetamine Control Act and the 2005 Combat Meth Epidemic Act limited key ingredients and shut down domestic labs. During this period, meth-related arrests, overdoses, and emergency visits all declined, and it looked like the country had successfully reduced meth production and consumption. Since around 2015, meth use has surged again, with rising numbers of people using meth frequently or daily, more methamphetamine use disorders, increased injection use, and sharp increases in overdose deaths. Use is now widespread across regions and demographics, often involving polydrug use like meth and plus fentanyl, making meth a major contributor to today's overdose and mental health crisis. Methamphetamine is usually portrayed in the media in a very dramatic and negative way. News stories and TV shows often show the most extreme outcomes, with crime, violence, police raids, and harsh before and after photos. These images create stereotypes, especially the idea that meth use mainly happens in rural, poor, and white communities. Shows like Breaking Bad or Intervention add to this by focusing on chaos and danger instead of the full picture. What the media rarely covers are the real causes of addiction, like trauma or poverty, or the fact that people can and do recover. Because of these one sided portrayals, the public often supports punishment instead of treatment, which increases stigma and makes it harder for people to actually get help. So, across the US, methamphetamine prevention and treatment efforts focus on a mix of behavioral therapies, harm reduction, and community based programs. Since there are no FDA approved medications for meth addiction, treatment relies heavily on cognitive behavioral therapy and contingency management, which reward individuals for staying drug free and have shown strong results. Many states also support harm reduction services like syringe service programs, safe use education, and mental health support to reduce overdose risks. On the prevention side, schools and public health agencies work to educate youth, strengthen coping skills, and reduce early drug exposure. Law enforcement collaborates with public health partners to limit meth distribution by tracking trafficking routes and shutting down illegal labs. Michigan, in particular, has expanded access to treatment through community health organizations, including the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, which provides funding for outpatient programs, residential recovery centers, and contingency management based approaches. Michigan also invests heavily in harm reduction efforts such as syringe service programs, overdose prevention training, and free naloxone distribution. Several counties, including Wayne, Genesee, and Kent, operate specialized drug courts to connect people with treatment instead of jail time. And on the prevention side, Michigan supports school based education, public awareness campaigns like Talk Sooner, and partnerships with local organizations to reduce youth substance use. In the United States, methamphetamine is controlled through strict federal laws that focus on limiting supplies. The government regulates the chemicals used to make meth through the Comprehensive Methamphetamine Control Act and the Combat Methamphetamine Epidemic Act, which require ID checks and purchase limits for products like pseudoephedrine. And more recently, the Methamphetamine Response Act labels meth as an emerging drug threat and pushes for a national plan that mixes enforcement with treatment and prevention. Michigan also has very tough laws. Possessing any amount of meth is a felony, and manufacturing or selling it can lead up to 20 years in prison. The state also limits how much pseudoephedrine a person can buy, so legally, meth is treated very seriously at every level. At the same time, there is a shift towards harm reduction because punishment alone has not stopped meth use. Harm reduction aims to lower risks and keep people safe. Michigan recently legalized syringe service programs statewide, which means people can access clean syringes without being charged for paraphernalia. These programs help prevent HIV and hepatitis C and connect people to treatment. The state has also the state has many active sites and has invested more than $131 million into prevention, treatment, and recovery services. Here are the citations that I used for my presentation, and thank you for watching.